What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Philly Sports History for January 10th, 2024. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to a Wednesday edition of the podcast. As always, let's start with a recap of the question of the day. And I think part of this probably goes to the demographics of the people listening, but overwhelming majority, Michael Jordan is the greatest NBA player of all time, not named Wilt Chamberlain. I don't necessarily disagree. I think it goes MJ, Kobe, then LeBron. Kobe and Michael are just, I think, ahead because of their mentality and what they did. Just like that, as Kobe says, the Mamba mentality. Both Kobe and LeBron do credit Jordan with being their influence. So, again, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of the three. But for my money, it's Michael, and the arguments are there, and it's a fun debate. But I think a lot that depends on when you grew up and your mindset and just what you witnessed growing up. So thanks, as always, for participating in the question of the day. 267-495-8531 get you in on the voice or text line, 267-495-8531. While you're at it, be sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jimbo_Mont. Let's get those numbers up to 100 because then it opens up all kinds of doors and allows us to do more things with the podcast and on the channel. I'm still looking and trying to figure out a way to do something live. Won't be for the Eagles playoff run but more on that later. But be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Even if you're listening to the audio version, just go to my YouTube, Jimbo_Mont, and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, Flyers in action against Montreal tonight down at the Wells Fargo Center. The Gauthier situation, diving more into that, there's definitely like a side story going on that I don't necessarily want to get into with some other Flyers podcasters and reporters. So don't want to necessarily get into what they're going through with breaking stories and things like that. But the Gauthier situation, obviously he didn't want to be here. And I think two things going on here. John Tortorella was like, well, we don't want you here then, which I tend to agree. And that's a good Philly style mentality. Fine, go. And I think now we were talking about it on my one text chain. It kind of creates a villain now, even though he's on the West Coast for the Flyers. And that's huge because you have Sidney Crosby getting up there in years and not sure how much he has left. But there's not really that rivalry right now with the Flyers or that villain. You need to put a face. Like with the Cowboys in the 90s, it was the triplets, Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. Right now with the 49ers, you got Deebo Samuels. Dak Prescott, even though it's not necessarily a jerk, he's sort of the face of the Cowboys franchise. There for a while it was Ezekiel Elliott. It was Michael Strahan for the Giants. Flyers, obviously, Sidney Crosby, Mario Lemieux, guys like that, even Ty Domi. So you need sort of that foil. And even though it's a West Coast team, maybe this will help spark and reignite some interest in the Flyers. But I like that. And, Tortorella, I don't know him from a hole in the wall. And when you're coach, it gave me some Buddy Ryan type vibes when I was listening to him speak about this. In that trade, though, Jamie Drysdale was the number 6 pick in 2020, so it's not like they got a slouch in return along with that draft pick. He is coming off an injury, but from what I heard from Briere, they did their due diligence, and he's fine. It was a shoulder injury, so I don't know how much that will affect his skating, but he is a defenseman, so not a bad thing for the Flyers. But obviously, Gauthier probably is going to be, or looks like anyway, he's going to be the bigger star. But I want to credit Jonesy and Danny Briere for the way they handled this. They were able to really strike while the iron is hot because Gauthier had a big, I guess it was the World Juniors or whatever tournament they just had for the Team USA. Had a great tournament, so they were able to strike while the iron was hot. Didn't allow this to become a distraction, which I think with the way we saw it with A.J. Brown and doofus Marcus Hayes over there, how the media sometimes can turn things into bigger things than what they need to be. They didn't allow that to happen. They were able to maximize what they were able to get for it, and they handled it the right way. Like, they didn't really say anything bad about him. They didn't really they just said, look, he said he didn't want to play here. We saw an opportunity. We took it. So kudos to Jonesy and Briere for the way they handled that and just getting the most they could for it. And again, you're in the middle of a rebuild, so being able to unload something like this and move forward and not become a distraction to your team, that's the main thing right now. As to borrow Jalen Hurts' slogan, the thing is the thing. So the thing did not get messed up by the way they did the other thing. See, I've been following Jalen enough now to know that I didn't really say anything there, but I said a lot. All right, Sixers in action tonight down in Atlanta against the Hawks. No Joe, his knee is still swollen. Not concerned yet, but it is concerning that he came. Worth watching, I shouldn't say, not concerning, but worth watching that he came off the ankle injury, played a game or two, or I think it was only one game, and now his knee is swollen, so I don't know if that was like an overcompensation. He did seem like he tweaked something early in that game the other night, so we'll see how that goes, but it's worth monitoring. But DeAnthony Melton is coming back tonight, which is a huge thing for the Sixers, especially after the way they've been playing. And I was looking more into the whole Nick Nurse thing, and there was a lot of things I saw on Twitter because he was trending. So I read some of the articles and watched some of his interviews. And basically, that Monday practice was very intense. Yes, they went back to basics, but it was more of like a training camp type atmosphere where they went hard. And he said that was due to their effort. He was like, I like the fact that he nipped it in the bud. He said, we didn't play well the past 2 games. I'm stopping it now. And I like that because it shows accountability. He basically, he didn't, I forget which player it was now. I think it was Jaden Springer. And they were asking him about his playing time. Excuse me. Sorry about that. They were asking about his playing time. And he said something about if he makes his shots or something, it's going to happen. Like, just the way he worded it and the semantics of it was way different than what Doc would. And it's basically holding Jaden accountable for doing what he needs to do and putting in the work. And I like it. And he didn't throw anybody under the bus, per se, but it's just the way he worded it. And I really, it's a small sample size so far, but I like what Nick Nurse has done. And the fact that he's catching this now and not letting them go on a slide, I think, to me, shows the difference. And I don't want to bash Doc. He's not here anymore. But I tell you this all the time, the Sixers like my ex-girlfriend. So, of course, he's always going to be on my mind. But he wouldn't have done something like that. So the fact that Nick Nurse is holding them accountable now, making them work because of lack of effort, I mean, you got to love it. And the fact that coming into this now without Joe for I don't know how many games, hopefully it's just another game, maybe 2, but they still need to win without him, and playing without Joe is going to give those other guys that experience. I've talked so much about it, and it's just I love what Nick Nurse is doing. This is a Nick Nurse appreciation post, not a Doc Rivers ripping post, although both can happen. You know what should happen? Go to Philly Goat. They have you covered when it comes to all of your Philly sports apparel needs, Philly-centric, Philly neighborhoods, Rocky, water ice, soft pretzels, you name it, they got it. Go check them out. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off your order. Pitchers and catchers are right around the corner, so be sure to get your Believe shirt for the 2024 season. You can get the right color scheme. You can wear it for the Sixers as well. That's the beauty of the Sixers and Eagles, or Sixers and Phillies having similar colors. You can still, like my Ring the Bell shirt, I don't even remember whether it was a Sixers shirt or a Phillies shirt, but I can wear it to both now. So go to phillygoat.com. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off your order. That's phillygoat.com. Promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off. All right, Eagles. And I think the biggest story for me yesterday was, and it came out late, and I guess because it's on the West Coast, but there was an interview with Javon Hargrave, and basically they asked him the biggest difference between Philly and San Francisco, and he basically said the intensity, I think, was his wording, and they practice hard, and Mike Shanahan really has really pushes them, and I don't know whether they came in motivated like that or whether that's something he always does, but that is definitely a telling sign for me because that's something we talked about in training camp, and we got lucky last year. I mean, everybody praised Sirianni for the way he handled training camp last year, and it worked out. I mean, they didn't have many injuries. They went to the Super Bowl. This year, they've had some injuries. They're mired in that 6 games, whatever you want to call it right now. Some people will call it collapse, but there's something to be said. Does he need to work them harder? Does he need to practice harder? I remember at one point in training camp, there was a story that he stopped practice and started freaking out on them in training camp and then sort of backed off or something. So it's worth mentioning that Javon Hargrave is saying that the intensity is there. And that, I will say, goes right to the coach. And to me, I'm not necessarily driving and leading the Fire Nick Sirianni bandwagon like a lot of people are around here. But I think, because I do think a lot of it comes down to the players not executing. However, it also comes down to the coach of getting them prepared and ready to execute. And that falls on Sirianni. The fact that Hargrave, and again, you got to take it with a grain of salt only because you never know. I mean, you saw what, I can't even think of his name now. The guy that went to Detroit for us, and he was like, "Oh, it's great over," and that was just him being butthurt over the fact he didn't get a contract. So you take it with a grain of salt, but I think the fact that he was very adamant and just the wording he used about intensity and how hard they practice, that to me is not surprising because that to me will kind of translates and validates what's happening on the field right now with this team. So, and then going back to the whole Fire Sirianni thing, I'm not there yet. I think he should get one more shot. I think with the coordinators, they had to pick from the bottom of the barrel, and he chose wrong. I mean, and I think what very amplified all of this is the fact he chose wrong for both of them. If he'd have chosen one wrong, it would have been, we maybe wouldn't have been as glaring as a team thing. But the fact he chose both coordinators wrong, I think that's where his mistake was. I think you give him one more shot. I think he's on a short leash. I don't think you fire him mid-season or anything like that. And I'm saying this now while there's still a game to be played on Monday. I'm telling you right now, depending on what I see Monday, my whole vibe and mindset on that might change. But I think it was just the perfect storm between the longer season going to the Super Bowl, the fact that you knew Steichen was going, but you got screwed by Gannon. Sorry, I mean the whole thing was shady. So you really got screwed there. So they were left scrambling, and again, he made 2 wrong picks. He maybe survived one, but he picked 2. I think maybe Howie needs to and Jeffrey Lurie needs to be in there when they're trying to decide. I know Jeffrey Lurie is not going to be happy. The fact that he considers the Eagles sort of the gold standard, or that's sort of the motto he lives by, and the fact that this is a monumental, historic collapse never before seen in the NFL, it's not going to sit well with Jeffrey Lurie. I mean, he's fired coaches for less, so anxious to see how it goes. I do know that a lot of people are talking about, oh, he lost the locker room, and the players aren't coming out and supporting him, but they are. You got to just follow, like Dallas Goedert has supported him, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. They're all saying we are with Nick, like we support him. And I think, again, my favorite writer for the Inquirer, Marcus Hayes, blew the whole thing out of proportion with the whole calling an audible on that play. They were improvising, and I think too many people are saying that that's a shot at Sirianni. I don't think it is. I think it's just 2 guys wanting to win. They're pressing. The team is pressing. I've said it so many times on this podcast, both winning and losing. When things go well, they tend to snowball that way. When they go bad, they tend to snowball that way. We're seeing the snowball going that way, and I think guys are trying to do a lot to stop. And I think if I was Sirianni, I would just have them. I like the fact that A.J. Brown's taking them to escape rooms, trying to relax. But you need to get back to basics. Get back to Eagles football. And I don't know why he hasn't done this before. Somebody mentioned it previously that they should be watching film of last year. They should be watching film of games this year when they played well, and get back to who they are. And that, to me, comes on the coach. That's why I'm holding out judgment on what to do with Sirianni until I see how they come out Monday. Two coaches that have been linked to the Eagles already, should they fire? You got to love Philly media. But that are already linked to the Eagles, should they fire Sirianni? First is Bill Belichick, and I'm going to say right now that's a hard no. Don't want him. Don't want anything to do with it. Not because I don't think he's a good coach and he could come in and change the culture, but the numbers suggest we're on Super Bowl 8 now. And the numbers suggest no coach has ever won 2 Super Bowls with 2 different teams. Coaches have gotten there with 2 different teams, like Don Shula, Andy Reid. No, just count me out. I'm not in on Bill Belichick. The other one was Mike Vrabel. I don't know why I can't say his name now. Vrabel, the guy from Tennessee. And I don't want him because I don't think he wants to be here. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see Bill Belichick's going to be out in New England, however they want to spin it or whatever, and Vrabel is going back to New England to be their coach. So there's that, and I think you give Nick one more year. I mean, I think and see. I mean, this thing snowballed, and you got to give. I say you give him a chance to fix it, and maybe it's because I'm an educator and all about helping people learn and grow. I know this is the NFL, so it's a different beast, but I think allow him to fix what went wrong and then see how next year goes. But again, I think his seat should be very, very warm heading into next year. All right. Be sure to check out my boys at the Clashing Conferences podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. New episodes drop on Thursdays. This week, I'll make sure I'll post all the information. I did do a guest spot with them, so I will be on the episode that drops tonight. Well, I guess it'll be tonight at midnight if you're up late or work. But that's the Clashing Conferences podcast, wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. I had a lot of fun with those guys last night, so be sure to check out the Clashing Conferences podcast. I'll have more information once the new episode drops tomorrow, but be on the lookout for that. Give them a like and a shout out and a subscription over there. So just do yourself a favor. Just subscribe to the Clashing Conferences. Subscribe to This Day in Philly Sports History. You'll be fine. All right, today we are going to go back to 1918, and on January 10th, 1918, Connie Mack traded first baseman Stuffy McInnis to the Red Sox for Larry Gardner, Tilly Walker, and Hick Cady. And I love saying some of these old school names like that. But Stuffy was the last remaining member of Connie Mack's famed $100,000 infield, who from 1910 to 1914, McInnis, Eddie Collins, Jack Barry, and Frank Home Run Baker helped lead the A's to 4 American League pennants and 3 World Series championships. However, after the 1914 World Series, Connie Mack began to tear apart, to dismantle the A's and get rid of some of the players for financial reasons. There was a new upstart league that was paying more, and he couldn't afford to match the salaries of the Federal League. I talked about this. There's a Back to the Future episode on Connie Mack, if you want to go check that out for more details on this. But Connie Mack was just like, fine, I'm not paying you, and he got rid of guys. So Collins and Baker both ended up in the Hall of Fame, but McInnis was the last surviving member of that $100,000 infield. Basically, that would have been like a drop in the bucket today. It's like, I think today's dollars, $100,000 is $2.6 million, but back then it was just whoa. But so the $100,000 infield was dismantled on this day in 1918. But within 11 years, Connie Mack had built another dynasty that won 3 straight pennants and 2 World Series between 1929 and 1931. They battled with the Yankees' Murderers Row for American League supremacy back then, and then it all sort of fell apart after the Depression. But you can find out more about that on the Back to the Future episode with a PH. that I did on Connie Mack. But on this day, Connie Mack traded first baseman Stuffy McInnis to the Red Sox, breaking up and finally getting rid of the last member of the $100,000 infield for the Philadelphia Athletics that did win 3 World Series and 4 American League pennants between 1910 and 1914. All right, finally today, our Philly sports free agent who had a fresh start in Philly is Ricky Waters. And he signed a 3-year, $6.9 million in contract in 1995. They had a new team, new coach. He was coming off a Pro Bowl year. He scored 3 touchdowns in the Super Bowl the year prior. So expectations were super, super high for Ricky Waters. And obviously it did not start off well. That first game against Tampa Bay at the Vet, he had 17 rushes for 37 yards, 5 catches for 34 yards, and a fumble. And one memorable quote that will live with him till the day that he dies. And when he does, all the things you're going to see, all the package you're going to see on TV are going to mention this. He simply said when he alligator armed a ball over the middle while the Eagles were driving to try to get back into that game, they asked him why he didn't go for it. He said, "For who? For what?" But after that first game, things did get much, much better for Ricky Waters here in Philly. Played 3 years, 2 playoff appearances, 2 Pro Bowls. Unfortunately for him, the Eagles had a carousel of quarterbacks then. They had Randall, Rodney Peete, Ty Detmer, Bobby Hoyne, and even Mark Rippon for a half. So it was not the ideal situation. They had a pretty solid defense back then, just no quarterback. But Ricky Waters did his best. 3,700 rushing yards, 31 touchdowns, 161 catches for 1,300 yards. Those 3,700 rushing yards, believe it or not, are good for 7th on the Eagles' all-time running back list. He did have a productive 3 or 4 seasons in Seattle after he left Philly, but by far the best stretch of his career did happen here in Philly, even though you would have never have known it after his first game when he simply said, "For who? For what?" when asked why he didn't try to go catch a ball over the middle. But Ricky Waters is our Philly athlete who had a fresh start in Philly, had some good years in San Francisco, won a Super Bowl, made a couple Pro Bowls, but really, really excelled. And if he does ever get into the Hall of Fame, it will be in large part to the 3 years he spent here in Philly. So Ricky Waters, the Harrisburg native, Bishop McDevitt, I think he went to, came here in 1995 under Ray Rhodes. Couldn't get it done because the Eagles did not have a quarterback for him. But shout out to you, Mr. Waters. I appreciate you. On this day back in 1918, Connie Mack traded away Stuffy McInnis, the last piece of his famed $100,000 infield. It would be a rough 10-year stretch, but then Connie Mack would build a dynasty once again before the A's eventually left Philly to go to Oakland via way of Kansas City. Sixers Flyers both in action tonight. Shout out to Jonesy and Briere for their handling of the Cutter Gauthier situation. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jimbo_Mont. Check out my boys at Clashing Conferences. You'll see a familiar face on there this week. Almost forgot about our question of the day. And I think there's only one thing to say. With everything that's going on with the Eagles, are you excited for this playoff game? It's been a very, very subdued week and a lot of bitching, a lot of complaining. But we are in the playoffs. We're one of 14 teams left. Are you excited for Monday night's game? Or are you just looking to get it over with and wish we played the early game on Saturday? Let me know. 267-495-8531. Send your voicemail or text message. 267-495-8531. That is today's question of the day. Are you excited for the Eagles playoff game on Monday? Hopefully everybody is safe after all that rain and wind last night. Had a little bit of water in my basement, but all is well. I prepared for it, so we should be good. But if you're cleaning up, be safe. If you're still without power, be safe. But go have yourselves a Wednesday. This has been This Day in Philly Sports History. I'm Jim Montgomery, and until next time, I'll see you when I see you.